My name is Andrei. Thanks for coming. And usually I speak about performance testing tools, and all of those specific things, but it's not this time, because through all of these years of performance testing and tools, I realized that I know something different and something more general from the world of open source. And I'd like to share this knowledge because I observe the space and I see that people need to learn something about open source as process side of the thing. A couple of words about my footprint in open source. I'm mostly known as JMeter Plugins.org founder. I started that project 8 years ago, and it became pretty successful. That's my main source of learning how open source behaves, how open source projects behave on the long-term runs. I was invited as JMeter core contributor because of those plugins. And I also became a maintainer of one of Jenkins plugins. It's Jenkins performance plugin. And that presents another side of experience because it's not like you start the project from the scratch. It's when you take project that exists there for many years and you're just adopting it and helping it to not die and evolve. It's another side of things, what can happen and how you can become a significant contributor to open source by not letting some well-adopted project to die. We will review the reasons why projects might stagnate and die in the open source. My focus recently changed more towards Torus tool as an abstraction layer over multiple load testing tools. This is the next concept that we're promoting is when you say that your load testing tools are already good and okay, but you need something on top of that to orchestrate the tests. So this is another open source project, started from the scratch again, the same battle of making open source projects successful. So this is all coming from my practice and not something that I read in the books. The agenda would be pretty simple. We will review the open source, we will review what professional open source means, and we will review the stages, approximate life span of your open source project. How does it start? How does it progress? And what are the threats for the project? Let's first quickly review what open source is systematically and how people see it. What I recommend you is to watch the movie. There is a documentary movie called Revolution Operating System. It tells the story how open source started conquering the world. This is the very beginning of the open source. It's not what we have today, it's how it was starting. But the lows, not the lows, but the trends, they were set back then, and it's already, all of those features that we were observing back then, they are consistently held and continue evolving today. The rules mostly the same like it was in the past. The values of open source, like we know it, are pretty simple. We know that it offers cost efficiency by saving time and money. Open source projects considered tested, reliable, and secure, and this is true only for mature projects. For the young projects, it's not true. And your goal when you think of making open source projects successful is to reach that point when you are mature and your project is tested, is reliable, and secure. And this is one of the main problems for the open source project to reach that phase, to get out of that early, untested, unreliable, because open source is also one of the weak parts of open source is also being untested, unreliable, and arguably secure. The good thing, we live in a social world, so being open source friendly means that you will be considered as positive reputation person or company in modern software world. If you are not friendly with open source, if you try to struggle it, if you try to limit it in any way, abuse it in not a good way, I don't know, cover it with patents, you would be considered as a bad person, and in the social world, your reputation will be well known. And this is not what you want, so you want to learn the rules how you play in the open source world when open source dominates, and there's no question that it does dominate. Important for companies is that open source attracts the talent. People who are young and they're active and enthusiastic, they tend to follow anything new and cool. They don't like old technologies, they want something new and cool. So if you have positive reputation of open source friendly company that adopts all of the new and cool technologies, most likely you will attract new and young talent. This becomes critical for some of the companies or for all of them. Open source in general encourages collaboration and distribution, and might be extremely valuable if you want to make something to be well adopted in the community. And this is the way to distribute. If you're selling something as purely commercial, it's hard to distribute that. If you're giving away for free something cool, it makes it easier to distribute that and maybe have less direct ways to monetize that. This is the rules of modern open source dominated world. The ways how you contribute in open source are varying. It's not only code contributions. It's not only writing an open source project from the scratch that you can contribute to the modern open source world. There's actually a lot more. You can be contributing as process contributor, like me with performance plugin for Jenkins. I'm not writing the code there. I'm a maintainer of the project, and my help is to review the pull requests from the community, accept them, make sure that they are documented, they have good quality, not breaking changes, have good unit test coverage, and release those changes as soon as I have enough for the next release or as soon as critical bug has been fixed. This is my contribution, and it's valuable because there is community which already willing to write the plugin, improve it. I don't need to do that. I just need to help the process going. There's nobody else. The project was abandoned. There's nobody else to help with that except me currently. Who knows, maybe after some time I will step out of this. But right now, this is my mission, to help it continue its evolution. The contribution is when you give your feedback and ideas and report that to the authors of open source project. This is extremely valuable. We will look into that from the other side, from the side of somebody running open source project. But you, as part of the community, you do contribute by saying your opinion because it changes the project. It forms the small pieces of content around it. Somebody would Google the same problem you got, find it, and probably will find the solution. And this is part of ecosystem for the open source project. You can write blog posts. This is a great example of BlazeMeter company that over years we created so huge mass of content and blog posts and knowledge base around JMeter load testing tool that we became dominant source of the information for that. It's all free, but it's highly beneficial for our company because all of the people who touches open source testing topic in the world, they will come to us. So it was commercially proven that this is a successful strategy to just give away content consistently over time, and then you will have your word in the audience. So it's not only theoretically, enthusiastically beneficial, it's also commercially beneficial to invest there. And yes, everyone benefits even without paying money by getting good quality, high quality content. And obviously all of the previous makes it obvious that questions and answers on forums and Stack Overflow also adds to that and can be highly valuable. This is how you get your engineering and technical level problem solved, by Googling, and you specifically look in the results, is there Stack Overflow? Because it means that it will be quite useful answer from Stack Overflow in Google results. And specifically for larger size organizations, there is inner source. There's open source and inner source. It's when you are large enough, so you want to have collaboration and sharing inside you, but separate from the outer world. So you start your inner source campaigns and inner source programs when you want to encourage different teams to avoid duplication and share their knowledge, share their technologies. And the challenges are exactly the same as in the open world, just limited to the organization. It's easier to see the outcome of that because you can control more inside boundaries of organization. So you would see how it takes years, but you can see, was it good or bad for the company, and did you avoid duplication of the effort? All the rules with inner source are the same as in open source. One book that I offered for you to read is The New Kingmakers. If Revolution OS was the book, was the movie of how it all started with open source, The New Kingmakers is the book which explains how it raised to the modern dominance situation when developers dictate their opinion to the management, explicitly or implicitly, but they pick the software because of open source, because of this easiness of how you just take and adopt. Manager is unnecessary chain here between developer and technology. There's no manager to decide. The manager gets the proposed technology and then he approves that or not. This is the emphasis of this book. I highly recommend that for reading, to understand the rules, how this all plays together. Let's review what is professional open source. It might sound strange. How can you do open source professionally? You can. Look at me. I am doing open source professionally for years. This is what I'm being paid for. And this is how I treat my life, even when I wasn't paid for what I do in open source. This is how I was treating. This is my personal drama, maybe, when my wife was complaining, why should you spend your time fixing software because some guy on a distant part of the world just say that on the forum instead of spending that time with me. But I'm doing that for serious. I cannot just skip that. I'm doing that professionally. One interesting thing is to see what is not professional open source. And this is the largest graveyard of projects in the world. It's called GitHub. They claim 20 million open repos there. And we know that 20 million is a crazy number, and most of them are not popular or professional in any way. Most of the truth is that we just abuse free service by GitHub. Thanks GitHub for giving this away for free. But good amount of those projects are made by enthusiastic people saying, hey, I have cool piece of software, let's put it into open space. But it doesn't make you a project. It doesn't make you successful. It doesn't make you professional, because just putting something into open is passive. And to make it successful, you need to be active. We frequently say this reactive versus proactive. So this is where you need to be proactive. There's also a second wave of contributors, which I observed specifically in open source communities. Some teachers in universities or colleges, they know that open source is good. They give courses about software with high accent on open source. And they force their students to contribute to open source as part of their graduation process from those courses. So these students, they have not enough time just because the course is quite condensed. So they come into open source projects and say, I want to contribute, give me something, give me bug to fix. But they don't have the knowledge of how open source functions, no experience how it functions, no domain area experience, but they're willing to contribute. So one of my goals is to spread the knowledge maybe to those students and those enthusiasts who want to contribute. How do you do that properly? And maybe one of the main rules is try to learn just a bit of domain area first and not just blindly work with the code. It's not about the code, it's about value that you bring. So my short explanation, what is professional open source, is that it's when you put your effort not into code anymore, but into how people use it, how many people use it, and increasing amount of people using it. This is what differs you. It's not when you concentrate on technical side of the things, it's when you concentrate on non-technical side of the things. This will be the emphasis of my whole talk. How to make it successful on purpose by treating it professionally. Another book that exists there by Carl Fogel. Although there is a cover for this book about open source, it has to be free because community would not buy the book about open source for significant amount of money, and the author is pretty enthusiastic about open source, so the book is available online. If you're trying to do the open source project professionally, this is your must-read book. And it's so sad for me that I came to read this book only most of my experience in open source has settled. Because I found in that book, I found all of those, my conclusions from open source just written there, waiting for me to be read. Some of my mistakes, some of my achievements, the things that I did right, I find the explanation for that in this book. And all of my evolution, some of my evolution stages, how I do it. And some of my mistakes like bounty approach for improving code of your projects. There's explicit statement in the book that bounties does not work, but I tried before reading that book. It doesn't work, really. The interesting thing, after I joined the startup company of BlazeMeter, and I tend to analyze all of my experience, the interesting thing is that running open source project professionally is just like running open source, not open source, startup business. There's so much similarities. We will review them one after another through this talk. It goes through the same life cycle stages. It has same activities and threads, same accents and emphasis of what you do. And my bonus question to you, no need to answer it right now, but maybe later, and you can share your answers with me, is if it's like a startup, is there exit for open source project? What is the metaphor for the exit of open source project? It's not death, definitely. Maybe it's when you can just step out of the project and it lives its own life. Something else maybe, I don't know. Let's be creative answering that question. Another book by Itzhak Adizes, and specific part of that book that I like is the life cycle of organization. But when I tried to match that life cycle to open source project, so much similarities, just like business. There is the curve of a life cycle, which starts with idea in your head, goes through the early stages of it with constant risk of dying. just like in startup. Not many of open source projects reach the stage when it's well adopted and self-sustaining life. Same like in the business, right? Most of the businesses and business attempts are dying early. Same for the open source projects. Most of them you would never hear about them because they're just dead. So this is funny similarity. Let's review the early times of the open source project. Okay, you want to start. How do you start? The tactics at the start is, for the God's sake, don't start your open source project. Try to find the existing project and join the effort. That would be much, much better because you would not have the risk of that dying early at your infancy. Try to find a project that has survived and join that ship. And don't start your own because you would need to spend too much effort. Another point is find the real gap. It's really easy to be creative and find some crazy ideas. But if it does not hit the market, this is again like product market fit, typical business things. If it does not match the audience needs, today's audience needs, if you are too visionary, too creative, it won't get adoption required for long-time survival. And the concrete advice here is start from your real job needs, not imaginary, real job needs. This is when I started JMeter plugins project. This is how we started Taurus project. From the real need that we hear from the customers, from the real need that I had at my job being head of QA department and requirement for testing thick application with crazy protocol on Microsoft platform. How do I do that? Do I start my new open source tool? No, I take the existing tool and write the plugin for it because I become part of ecosystem which already survived the infancy. And the main thing, prepare for long investments. It took me more than 5 years before I got first money produced by my open source project, before I got waves of contributors coming and spending it for me. It took me 5 years believing that my project will survive, being professional with it, promoting it. Prepare for the long investment. Don't quit it too early, or do quit it early if you recognize that it is failing. I was stubborn enough to not quit and win. Your early priorities is naming, niche, and marketing. If you treat your project as successful potentially, choose the name right. I have example when I was working in the other organization and we needed Jenkins plugin. And I took my colleague and said, hey, I know you're good at Java and you like experimenting, so create the Jenkins plugin. I need a hyperlink in the sidebar of Jenkins. So I want to put some file into Jenkins workspace and tell Jenkins, display the hyperlink there, take the hyperlink from the file. Well, it's simple, it's good. And he took it, wrote it, and he likes sailing. And guess how he names it? Anchor chain. What? He named the hyperlink in the sidebar plugin for Jenkins Anchor chain. It's there, you can find it. It's good, but it cannot be found by people. People would never understand what it makes. Oh my God, when you start open source project, be obvious. We have started recently new open source project. We called it Aperitif. It's funny, but at least we have chosen the name containing API at first, so you can at least guess what it does approximately. But don't call it anchor chain. I can see a bit schizophrenic logic behind anchor chain because it connects you to something, but it's too schizophrenic. Don't be that creative. Be obvious. This is just good rule in our life. Be as obvious as possible. When you're making an open source project, invest into documentation, but more importantly, invest into UX. This is how you get your growth. This is how you do your growth in business. If people come and see something ugly, they will go away. If people come and take unpleasant user experience with your project, whatever kind of experience you give, is it GUI project with unpleasant GUI? Is it library with the strange API and function names and unpleasant experience of debugging? Whatever it is, make the experience so good that people will stay. This is how I made JMeter plugins to be successful. My main differentiator in the beginning was good UX for JMeter. When you are in the components of JMeter, usually core components are not that pleasant to be used. So my differentiator was a pleasant plugin to be used. This is how I tried to solve that. And I see this pattern across many projects. If you are unpleasant, strategically you will constantly lose the audience. Again, imagine that you are startup business. Would you scare your customers or potential customers because you are ugly? No, you would invest in your visual design because this is the main thing. This is the first impression that you give. Next thing is support channel and responsiveness. Be extremely careful what you say, how you say it. Be extremely responsive. Be fast at responding to the support. Because this is what you don't want to happen, is when your potential customers, again, coming to your project, getting into some stupid first experience problem and trying to call for help, and you're not helping them, so they will leave. This is another threat for your project. Be careful. Again, I was telling you that story, how my wife was complaining about me being responsive to those early feedbacks and spending time with helping people and not having a walk with her. This is your life. This is how you do it professionally. And at the beginning, the mistake you can make is try to do it right from the beginning. Again, like with startup business, if you invest too deeply and preliminary optimize the process for your project, that's not something that you should be doing. The thing that you should be doing in the very beginning is marketing. From now on, you are a marketing person. If you have started your open source project, you have probably written the code already. At the moment you are considering to make a project, not a piece of code, at this moment you switch into marketing person, and this is your life. This is your first and primary focus. Find places when your audience gathers, where your potential users gather. Go there and speak there. Try to be helpful, not just promote. Attach your promotion to help of solving problems for people. Try to not be annoying. It's difficult when you are inside marketing, it's difficult to be annoying, right? Marketing tends to be annoying, but that's the way you do marketing. You speak to the audience, and that part of the audience which is relevant comes to you. And the irrelevant part of the audience might get annoyed. Be careful. Find your way. I was in a situation when I was really annoying with my JMeter plugins project at the early stages. I had some pushbacks, had to adjust towards that, but I was trying to promote my project. This is why it has survived. And there's an interesting path from no to yes. Remember this. When you see something and you think, no, it's not about me and it's not about my project, try to think, yes, but how? This helps you to adjust your project and maybe survive because you would find better product market fit. This is the same thing startup businesses do. You start with some idea and then you adjust. You're hearing for the feedback and you adjust. So when you came to the audience, to the support forum where, let's say, from my experience, where load testing people gather, And when you read those questions, they might be relevant and not solved by your project. But ask yourself, how can my project change to match and to answer that question in a positive way, saying, yes, I do. My project helps you with that. This is your important source of survival energy for the early stages and mid-term stages for the project. You are a marketing person. When you're doing your open source professionally, you are a marketing person. Now let's say you have survived early stage and you get some traction, you get some growth, you see that audience actually comes and enjoys it, it starts growing. It might take a couple of years. Remember, long investments. It doesn't take 6 months and you suddenly most successful open source project in the world. No, it will take a couple of years. But if you have survived, change your tactics now. Start attracting contributors. Now you need to grow your team, but you have no money to hire people. The only way you grow your team is you take enthusiasts and attract them. Value them high. If somebody comes and not demands but gives, all right, be extremely friendly. I had bad experiences when I was dictative too much and I was about to lose one of my early contributors. I had to step back and find a consensus and not lose the extremely valuable contributor. All of the people that write their articles about you, answer questions others, say thank you, appreciate their help, mention and help promote their blog posts on your Twitter, on your website. Try to get as many contributors happy with you, with your project, and help them being successful with what they contribute. This is valuable long term because at some point in the time, you might have a walk with your wife because somebody else will answer that question on the forum. This is the life that you want to get. This is what means to be successful when you can delegate answering those simple questions. Review your project's infrastructure. This is the time when you finally can invest into automation, proper hosting. You usually start with the GitHub pages, whatever. At this stage, you might go to your fully blown own website, not hosted on GitHub, but hosted on your own. You might spend some small money for that. It's not that expensive. Start considering giving away the control. This is, again, the delegating part of it. You might face the founder's trap here when you find yourself as dictator. When you struggle with this, hey, it lives its own life. It starts living its own life. People start bringing you contributions. Somebody comes with a pull request which is completely against how you do it, how you deal with that. And many people are not ready for this. Best case, they just don't answer and never reply to that pull request. Worst case, they start saying that you are doing this wrong. I was making this mistake my own, like you're doing this wrong. But how can you keep the project on a track and have people contributing? You need to start communicating on a really careful and professional way with your potential contributors. And one of the important things that you need as a founder of the project to be considering is listen to possible second breath ideas. Soon after you've grown up, you will hit the plateau of your life cycle, and your options are decline or breakthrough and second breath and second life for your project. And there's another book, it's called Innovator's Dilemma, which explains those life cycles of a product, not organization, but a product. When you hit that plateau and you want to break through, you want to avoid the decline. And for that, you need to hear the feedback from the field And there will be crazy enough, brave enough, creative enough people from your audience, if you've grown it up enough. There will be people who will give you those hints of, why not? Let's do this. I had that with JMeter plugins project when somebody came. It was a guy from Australia, which I obviously never saw him in person. But he came and said, hey, I took the crazy idea of running Selenium inside JMeter, which sounds ridiculous. But I came to the core JMeter and I suggested them that idea, and they said, no, this is crazy. And I said, why not? At that time, I was exactly on my plateau of ideas. I felt that project is probably not that exciting anymore. How can I retire from it? I had that bad stage of a project, and my personal feelings about the project was not good. I was about to ask community who will adopt that. But this guy has came and give a second breath because, wow, cool, and apparently it's so popular. Apparently so many people enjoy it. And although afterwards I realized that it has its own problems, this approach, but it's so cool. This is the second breath. Be careful, hear that, be open-minded to include those crazy ideas and give disruptive second breath to your project. Just like business, in your product, you would hit the stagnation of a product and you would need to break through or die. Because when you just not evolve, you die in the business. Important thing is that when you grown up, you will ask yourself, don't ask that question too early. Prepare for the long investment, but at the grown-up stage, you might think, or they will come to you, the money question. If you are large enough, they will come. And general advice about monetization when you start open source project, don't be greedy, be flexible, concentrate on growth. Don't think that you will get any significant money from that project. No, this is not the way you will get your outcome. Your outcome will be indirect. You will get a better job place. This is my career. I joined BlazeMeter because of what? JMeter plugins. I joined Yandex company back then. Why? Because of JMeter plugins. Because this is your strength, personal strength, when you have proven your leadership in some certain area. Be creative in reactions. Somebody might come to you and, I don't know, offer you some money for selling your projects or whatever. Try to think how can you convert, maybe have some consensus with your counterpart that will lead to even more growth to your project. Partner, exchange, I don't know, integrate with some technology. If commercial company comes to you, be happy, help them using it, don't be greedy. They might give you some small sponsorship money, that's fine, it will help you to pay your SSL certificate, website hosting, domain name, whatever things. That's not your main goal. Your main goal is to get the reputation that even commercial companies, if we will think back about Revolution OS movie, the main point, one of the main points that you will find there is that any open source technology and project was only really successful once commercial companies was starting using it for solving real tasks. When the money is on the stake, then it becomes real. And it's not your money, but it's your indirect influence for all of those money. So somehow money will come to you. People would just, the simplest thing is people will hire you because they would need something more in that area. The thing of sponsorship and advertisement is real. It's small money. I was using that money that I was getting from sponsorship of BlazeMeter. each Christmas, I was sending through PayPal small gifts to most impactful contributors over a year. So I was taking my support forums, code base, and I was looking who was the most impactful. There's usually like 3-4 people there, the most impactful third-party contributors. And I was taking part of those sponsorship money. I was contacting them and saying, hey guys, it's Christmas approaching. I wanted to appreciate you with small gift for your Christmas because you was extremely helpful. And I was sending them those money. Usually they were surprised because they didn't expect any outcome from their answers on support forums. But they got it, and they were happy. This is my appreciator for contributors, so they wouldn't just leave it at the moments when they feel not happy about anything. They won't leave it because they remember that they were appreciated. And donations, I don't think it's worth it, and my experience shows that people never donate any significant money. Don't lose your reputation, keep your bar high, wait for those big fish of sponsors and commercial companies to come, and be fine. Don't try to chase the small money. This is not what you need. And everything ends. You might find your project dying or stagnating at some time. This is natural. Everything comes to the end. You should recognize your threats early, at least be aware of that. This is why we have GitHub with all of these graveyard projects, is changes in your primary job and loss of interest because of that. This is main reason. This is what powers your initial creation of the open source project, your primary job. So if your primary job changes, you might lose the interest and abandon the project. This is how my contributors of JMeter plugins usually behave. I am consistent, I'm treating it professionally, but they coming when they solve their primary job task and they contributing part of that. For a while they work on that project, but as soon as their primary job changes, this is natural. They're stepping out because there's no time anymore for that thing in their life. Low adoption, this is what might stop you after like a couple of years of working on the project. If you see that there's still not enough adoption, you should be clear. It's maybe no product market fit, or you're doing something right. Maybe that's the sign of ending the project. You did something wrong. You, yourself, did something wrong. Have chosen wrong approach, was not investing into marketing and promoting, did not hit the right niche for your project. Something wrong. This is your business, your open source project. This is what you did wrong. You might, for example, you might get it wrong with lack of stability and compatibility. You were changing it too much. So people who were trying to use it from version to version, it was so incompatible that it was so stressful to take this technology. So they said, no, we cannot work on these roller coaster changes. That's the example. The feature-wise stagnation might be just slow death of your project, so there will be a competing project which takes something newer coming up. And you might be socially misbehaving. You might be not nice person. In the open source world, you are so exposed. Whatever you say, your public image, it so much matters. So you might be not that nice. This might be one of your threats. There are examples in the history when some people were saying aloud things that are improper, and the consequence of that was not good, usually. The good thing, after you try to do open source professionally for a while, you will succeeded or failed, you will get some skills for running startup business. And this is always nice to have. When you think closer to the business aspect, it means that your chances for survival in your next project or your next business would be higher because you shifted your focus from the technology into expansion, survival of this technology, and adoption of that technology. And my main emphasis of this talk was running open source project is just like running startup business. So much similarity that it's quite useful to try to do it. So when you do it, open source projects, do it right, do it professionally, and it will help you to make it successful on purpose, not occasionally, but intentionally, like I did it with JMeter plugins and other projects. Let's summarize. Open source projects, just like startups, focus on audience, not on technology and code. Once grown, adapt to the new stage, concentrate on your contributors, have those contributors and successors to let your project go when you have no time anymore, when your life has changed, who knows what happens. But if you have successors and enough of audience, you would step out. Maybe that's your exit, like physical exit from the project, right? This is it. Thank you. Any questions? Do we have some time for questions? No? No? Well, anyway, I'm here. I'm at Blazemeter booth. You probably saw those crazy guitar giveaways. I'm somewhere there around or in the corridors. Feel free to come and ask your question, share your feedback. Thanks for coming. Thank you.